Hello and welcome to the Quadcast. I'm the founder and host, John McAlevey. This podcast, while mainly for and about folks like me who have had their lives affected by a spinal cord injury, is really for anyone who just wants to be inspired. In this space, I speak with individuals who have had life-changing injuries and accidents, and yet in spite of insurmountable odds in many cases, have gone on to do amazing things with those lives. I'm reminded of the old metaphor that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Well, my guests, they take those lemons and roll right over them with their wheelchairs and rollators on their journey. I'd like to thank you for lending me your ears for another session of OT and PT for the soul. So, what do you say we get this show on the road? Hashim Garrett, welcome to the Quadcast.
Thanks for having me.
We've been kicking around some dates and some ideas and where we're going to get together, and today is finally the day. And I'd like to thank Dr. Trevor Dyson Hudson for reminding me, hey, John, you haven't had Hashim on yet. So we put that together. We got a kick out of that, but he's a great guy. And so I'm glad the day is finally here and that you're going to join me for the next 45 minutes or so. And what I usually like to do with my shows is sort of begin at the beginning. So if you could, Hashim, tell us, where did you grow up and what were some things you were interested in your youth?
Sure. Well, again, pleasure to be on your show. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And one of the things that I enjoyed doing the most, so I grew up in the 80s and, video games were new on the scene. And so, playing video games was a hobby of mine. And then but back then, really all the fun was outside, right? It wasn't really about being indoors.
Yeah.
But really, I enjoyed, bike riding with my friends and, roller skating. I wasn't really good playing basketball. That wasn't my forte. I was a pretty fast kid. I used to like to run a lot and, tag, things like that. Just kind of like, when I was growing up, you could literally make fun out of anything, like we had a game that we would play. It was called Skelly. Anybody growing up in New York City probably is familiar with it, where you get a top, like, from a water bottle, or not water bottle, but like milk carton or a milk top, and you put wax in it and you would skip it on the ground, and that was it, just simple things, give me a cap and some wax. And we had a game in handball. Or so, in New York City, it was just a lot of good stuff to do, but just always hanging outside with friends. And
the simple things, right?
Yeah, exactly. A stick and a ball,
It's funny. So, I can remember one of the last times I saw George Carlin, the comedian, and he was on, and he used to rail about how, parents were getting involved in everything and you have play dates now and have to set everything up. And he said, geez, don't kids go outside and play with sticks anymore? He said, I think parents in the world, they've outlawed sticks. There's no more sticks allowed. But yeah, it's true. And that was back in the days when, you would know that at a certain point, it was just time to get home for dinner, right? I mean, It wasn't like we had cell phones.
Yeah, it was usually two things. It was the proverbial lights were on, or my friends would look up and they go, your mother's in the window. So if my mother was in the window, that was like, all right, I gotta go.
Get your butt home.
Yeah, that was it. Your mother's in the window. And so, you run upstairs and that was it. Yep. So those were like the highlights of just growing up.
Sure. Speaking of your mother, I'm sure she was also, but did you have any, folks that around you growing up that were influences on your life that sort of kind of shaped who a young Hashim was?
Yeah, I think, I think in hindsight, I have more people than I probably realized in the moment. Obviously my mom and my dad, parents were big, instrumental figures, but I kind of think back to my grandmother, and so when I was going to visit her in the other part of Brooklyn, whenever we walked into her house, it was always you went straight to the bathroom and washed your hands. You couldn't go to the refrigerator. You would say hello to everybody, but you just made a beeline straight. You had to wash your hands. I was just and it was always speak and say hello and da-da-da. And all of those little nuances of mannerism really shaped me as an adult, right? And so, but in the moment, I had no idea. And all my cousins and everybody knew there was a certain rule that you had to follow, and you washed the dishes after whatever you ate, you washed. And so
Yeah.
those little things that I find that I carry on even now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely my parents, my grandparents and uncles, and those people definitely left the imprint on how
Yeah.
I conduct myself.
Very important. You think back, you mentioned at the time you didn't realize it was happening, and little did you know in the background it was shaping who you were and who you are today.
Indeed.
Great stuff. Well, now I'd like to turn the tides and sort of bring us back to kind of what we're all here together about to speak about today. And, what we have in common, we have a lot in common, but one thing that we do have in common is a spinal cord injury. So if you could, Hashim, tell us about the day that changed your life. What do you remember before, during, and in the immediate aftermath of the day that you were injured?
So I would say before, so I was 15 years old when I
Mhm.
sustained my spinal cord injury, and the days leading up to it, I was kind of like, as some people would say, like a wayward kid at that stage of my life. I was a teenager and I was really rebellious. I had been bullied when I was a little bit younger, and somewhere along the way, I had this bright idea to kind of like befriend the bullies. And so, if you can't beat them, join them. So I kind
Yeah.
of was, kind of trying to figure out my way as a teenager, and just I was making a lot of poor decisions. And so my mom and my dad, probably about 2 days before my injury, they sat me down and they were saying, my mom was really just concerned about the decisions that I was making. I was in the 10th grade at that point. And she said, we're going to move to Atlanta, Georgia in about 3 days. And so that was I guess like a Saturday or Sunday, we had this conversation.
Mhm.
So if you fast forward 48 hours, let's say Monday was Monday, May 7th. I was in the house all day, and my mom told me you don't have to go to school today because, she had already resigned from her job, and she was, going out and purchasing the U-Haul boxes and packing up the house and just making
Right.
arrangements for us to relocate literally in a day or two.
Yeah.
And so that evening, it was probably about 7 o'clock in the evening. My so-called friends that my mom had been telling me not to associate myself with and not to hang out with these guys anymore. They knocked on the door and they asked me to go outside, and I went outside with them. And I would say probably within 20 minutes of me standing outside talking with them,
Mm-hmm.
a kid walked up with a gun and started shooting. And
Oh, gosh.
I sustained my spinal cord injury as a result of a gunshot wound. And I'll never forget that, that moment of laying on the ground and, not realizing, like I did not know I had a spinal cord injury, but I knew I couldn't move my legs, and I knew
Yeah.
I couldn't feel anything. And just being, this little kid, 15 years old,
Mm.
and just the fear that gripped me, the unknown of whether am I going to die, and why can't I move my legs, and is the person
Yeah.
who shot me, are they coming back? Just all of these different things circulating in my head. I'll never forget. I was laying on the ground and I just said, God, please don't let me die. And
Right.
I felt a peace come over me that was truly hard to describe to anyone. But this peace of just everything was going to be fine when I called out to God. And so I waited, and the ambulance arrived and took me to the hospital. And so that moment really changed my life. Obviously, one, physically,
Yeah.
physically life was never going to be the same again. But then just, existentially, spiritually, something also made an imprint on me in that moment too, just because that peace in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the storm, has
Mm.
always, I think, helped to kind of like ground me a little bit, to let me know, even in my darkest, most turbulent, most uncertain and scary times, there's peace can be present there. A
Yeah.
storm, but just as quickly as a storm can come, a storm can go. And so it just kind of grounds me to let me know that, even when things look really bleak and dark, you're not alone, and
Yeah.
help is not far away.
That's amazing for someone at 15 to be so mature in that moment. I don't know whether I would have been able to come to grips with that. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And from there, Hashim, where did they take you? Did they take you straight to the hospital? And then once you got there, and I'd have to ask when your family found out and how that all went down. Was that must have been tough, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So my mom, she found out right away. My, people from the neighborhood went and got her. She was home, and when the EMS workers were transporting me in the hospital, I nearly died in the back of that ambulance because I was shot multiple times, and
Mm.
all of the bullets, they not only entered, but they also exited my body. So I had
Okay.
multiple gunshot wounds. And
Mm.
so while I was en route to the hospital, I had this out of body experience, soul leaving my body. And, thankfully
Wow.
while I was, while they were transporting me, my mom was just, hysterical because she could hear the EMS workers just saying, we're losing them, we're losing them.
Oh,
We can't
dear
get his
God.
BP, we're losing them. And my mom's in the front seat of the ambulance. And I can hear her as my soul is leaving my body, John. I can hear her. And she was uttering, she said, I told him to take out the garbage. I told him to wash the dishes. I told him to take the movies back, and those were chores that I was supposed to have done that day. And I just remember as she was yelling about those chores and crying, I just remember
Yep.
saying, Mom, be quiet. I remember thinking it at least, and my
Of
soul
course.
goes back into my body. And
Wow.
so as they rushed me to the hospital, the hospital that I went to was Brookdale Hospital
Okay.
in another part of Brooklyn. And I often tell people that the emergency room of the hospital for someone who sustained, a traumatic injury, it kind of reminds you of a NASCAR pit when they pull a car in and they converge on it, moving and moving, and they're
Yeah.
shipping it. That's literally like what it's like because, the doctors and the nurses and the EMS and the police, they're all there. What's going to happen? Who did this? And they're like, get them to the operating room and boom.
Put them on the lift. Get them
Yeah, put
up
them
in
on the
the
left,
air.
move it, keep them moving, And so, but my mom was right there every step of the way. When they said rush them up to the operating room, she's right there holding my hand on the elevator as we're going up to the
That's
operating
great.
room. And then, when I get out the operating room, she's sitting right there at my bedside in the
Mm,
ICU. So yeah, she and my dad were constant presence while I was in that hospital
that's
at
terrific.
Brookdale for about 28 days. I was an inpatient.
Okay. Okay. And what did the doctors tell you? I mean, aside from the almost dying, from the
Mm.
gunshot wounds, what did they tell you about the injury that you had sustained and what life might look like heretofore? I mean, did they tell you right away that it's a complete injury and you're not going to walk again? Did that conversation happen there?
No, well, in the emergency room, they told me he's paralyzed. I don't know. I don't even know if they were talking to me, but they just asked, "Can you feel this? Can you feel this?" And hot, the sharp and the dull and the hot and the cold. And
I
I said
hate that.
no,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
said, okay, he's paralyzed. I had no idea. I'm 15 years old. I didn't even know what that word meant at the time.
Right.
And
Right.
so then when I was an actual inpatient at Brookdale, no doctors really told me. I don't ever recall anybody saying that I was paralyzed. I don't recall them saying that for those 20
Okay.
days. And I'm
Mhm.
sure the word paralysis came up. I'm sure it did. But, I
Right.
was just like in a state of confusion and
Yeah.
pain. But I do
Yeah.
recall one doctor one day, I don't know if he was a resident, but he just walked in my room and my mom and we were in the room and I said, I'm having this pain.
Mm.
This pain in my leg and it keeps throbbing, it's hurting.
Wow.
And he was so callous, John. He walked in and he was like, all of the muscles in your all of the muscles in your legs are gonna shrivel up and die. And he walked out the room. And my mother and
Wow.
my mom and we just looked at each other. It was literally like all of the air just got sucked out of the room.
Of course it
And
did.
I was like, oh,
I don't
you
want to see
know,
that guy again.
yeah, I don't, and so that was a hard pill to swallow. But then when I was discharged from Brookdale, I went to NYU at
Okay.
Rusk Institute on 34th
Okay.
Street and First Avenue.
That's my
And
next question. Where did you rehab? Yeah. Is that where you went? You
yeah,
went to Rusk?
I went to Rusk and
Wow.
I met a phenomenal, my pediatrician at that time. Well, I guess my physiatrist, not my pediatrician, but my physiatrist. Her name was Dr. Joan Gold, a
Okay.
phenomenal doctor out in NYU.
Okay.
And she, I remember I was there for about 5 months, inpatient.
Yeah. Yeah.
And mom and, dad came by and cousins and friends came to visit me every week. But
Mm.
she told me when I was discharged, she gave me a form that just kind of highlighted the things I will be able to do and the things that I may have a little trouble with.
Okay.
And I found that to be extremely hopeful. It made me
Yeah.
hopeful. It made me optimistic because it just let me know that there was light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah.
that, you can. And that was one of the things that she sent me off with, just saying, there's a lot that you can accomplish, and I expect you to accomplish these things.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
was just like, all right, Doc, got it. Those are my
Yeah.
marching orders,
Hmm.
so kind of like pick your head up. You're going to do really well in life.
No
Yeah.
doubt. And
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, what was the year that this all happened?
1990.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Dinosaurs were present. There were
You,
dinosaurs roaming the earth when I was
yeah.
there. Sure.
Well, you've got
Hmm.
2 years on me. I was 92 at the time. And so, yeah,
Mm,
we're pretty much in that same swing path together.
yeah, yeah.
So, and what you brought up is so true. And working at Kessler today, it's so different. I mean, I spent just about 5 months rehabbing at Kessler, and you did
Mm,
5 at Rusk. Now, people on our wing, if they get 5 weeks,
yeah,
Hashim,
no.
that's a lifetime. So
Yeah.
it's changed so dramatically and so drastically. I don't know how. First of all, the patient is able to do it in 5 weeks,
Right,
but not
right.
only that, but the family members. You're
Yeah.
taking home some people who, in a lot of cases are high quads that are
Mm,
complete, and you're talking Hoyer lifts and getting them in and out of bed and feeding them and showering them and dressing them and changing your house drastically and putting the showers. And it's just like, they have this look on their face like, oh my God, what are we doing
right,
here? And you're sending them
right,
home right now?
right,
It's
right.
it's it's frightening. It really
Yeah,
is frightening.
it really is. I met a patient a few days ago, and he was at Kessler, and he was
Uh-huh.
getting discharged, and he was injured a month ago. So
Yeah,
that means
it's
he not only he was at the trauma center, like his trauma unit, and at Kessler all within 1 month.
it's
And
nuts.
he was on his way getting discharged like in a week. I was like,
It's crazy.
I couldn't even fathom like the speed of how all of
Yeah.
this is happening. That
Couldn't do
Yeah,
it.
I couldn't
Couldn't
do
do
it.
it.
It's truly, truly
How
unfortunate.
you've sort of hit on it already, but how important were your family members and your friends to your recovery? I know I could have never done it by myself. And there were people that were with me that were there, and they were by themselves. I mean, they had maybe 1 or 2 people come and visit them over like a couple months span. And I could not have done that. And I don't know how these people rehab during COVID, where nobody was allowed in the
Mm,
building. And so, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But how important was having that, familial and friendly touch when you were in there?
definitely. I would say that was the cornerstone to my recovery. My mom and dad were at the hospital, when I was the first hospital, Brookdale, while I was there 28 days. Mom
Yeah.
was there every day that she was there every day. And when she needed to go home to shower, dad came, and they just literally took turns
Yeah.
for 28 days nonstop, never leaving my bedside. And then when I was at NYU, Dr. Gold was like, okay, that's not going to happen here. You can't sleep here. You got to go home, mom. Let us do
Yeah.
our work with him here. And that was important. But then even afterwards, after being discharged, because that's where the rubber really meets the road, right? Now you got to go home, and what's home like, and is it accessible? And
Yeah.
you're just trying to find your bearing. And then I was really fortunate because I had cousins that came to visit me every week. Because we did not relocate to Atlanta, Georgia after
Okay.
my injury. We were at NYU, and funny little story about Dr. Gold, which I always truly treasure her so much, is that when it was time for me to get discharged from Rusk, she asked my mom and dad, so where exactly is my patient going to go home to? And mom and dad explained, well, we were supposed to move. And Dr. Gold says, okay, understandable. You guys, that plan got derailed. But so she said, my mom said, maybe we'll just go back to, our own home, old apartment. And Dr.
Yeah.
Gold, asked, okay, is it accessible? And mom said no. So Dr. Gold goes, no, he can't go back there because I don't want people taking him up the stairs. It was a 4-story
Right.
walk up. And so
Jeez.
my dad chirped in, and he said, well, I've got an apartment in another part of Brooklyn. Dr. Gold says, well, no, I don't really like that area too much. I think it's a little bit too violent. Right. And so then my parents told Dr. Gold, so what exactly do we do? And so Dr. Gold
Yeah.
says, just keep him, we'll keep him here in the hospital for a little bit longer. Right. And so my parents say, well, we found an apartment in Jersey City. Now, John, this is
Okay.
right 1990. The internet doesn't exist. Cell phones don't
Right.
exist. right? And so
Exactly.
my
Yeah.
parents, pick up the yellow pages in the telephone book, and then they say, we found an apartment in Jersey City. And don't you know, John, my beautiful doctor, Dr. Joan Gold, goes, I'm going to do some research on Jersey City. She does some research and she goes, I don't like Jersey City. He's going to stay here a little bit longer. And so my
She's like
parents
a
say,
real estate agent and a
yeah,
travel
yeah.
agent.
Listen, but she really cared, and I
She
always
did.
appreciate it. And so the long story short, my parents said we found an apartment in Bayonne, New Jersey, right
There you
next
go.
door, and she said, I like it. You can go
I
home.
like, you can go
Yeah.
home there. I'll let you go.
I'll let you go now. So,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, so it was really like a tribe. I say parents, family members, relatives, Dr. Gold, the therapist, everybody
Mhm.
really, really, there's so many people, the list goes on and on, who I really feel like played a
Yeah.
major role in who I am today.
Yeah. When you were at NYU, was there a doctor there, Dr. Ragnarsson, Christian Ragnarsson?
That name doesn't sound familiar.
He was a
Back
guy
then,
that I
but
think maybe he's been there for a number of years now, but
okay.
maybe not back as far back as the 90s. He was somebody that I know that Dr. Kirschblum wanted me to go and see. He's a pretty well-renowned guy, physiatrist in the whole SCI world. And I know he was at there, and he's been at a couple of other different places, but
Okay.
I can understand how maybe you missed him.
Yeah.
How about Hashim? We talk about how these injuries take so much from us physically, and they do. I mean, I can't really use my upper body, my arms, and my walking isn't all that great. And obviously you use a wheelchair these days, so they take so much from us physically. But what people don't realize is how they affect us mentally. Now, how is a 15-year-old Hashim Garrett kind of coming to grips with, like, my life just changed and it's not coming back the way that it was? And so what is the processing like when you're dealing with that, laying in that bed at night?
A lot of denial, a lot of denial.
Yeah.
I would say, not so good coping skills, right? Smoking,
Yeah.
marijuana, drinking,
Yeah.
and just, numbing the mental pain, right? Maybe if I'm in an altered state, I don't have to deal with this,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
can just pretend that everything is fine.
Trick your
And
mind, right?
yeah, it tricked my mind a little bit, right? And but then you have to come back to reality when you have to use the bathroom, and when
Right.
now
Exactly.
you were laughing too hard while you were smoking weed, and now
Yeah.
you peed your pants. Like,
Exactly.
that's not cool. So
Exactly.
like life will constantly remind you, I'm here. And at some point, Hashem, you're gonna have to deal with me. And so you go, nope, not yet. But there was those moments of, just realizing that it's going to take time, right?
Yeah.
And that was the one thing I realized at a young age, 15, laying in Brookdale. I can remember saying, maybe in 10 years, I'll be able to deal with this. I can
Yeah.
remember saying that when I was 15, I was just saying, maybe when I'm 25, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because I remember just thinking about all of the things that I can't do and I'll
Mhm.
never be able to do. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't. And just feeling so low.
Yeah.
And so just, and I the irony is that by the time I was 25, I think I was dealing with a little bit better, but it took a long time, and I'm 36 years in, and I still
Yeah.
have those moments of thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
I've got this, I've got it all down packed. And then you go, yeah, but
I
life can
don't.
throw you a curveball, and no, you don't. And so,
Yeah.
but I just think it's been a combination of saying, okay, give yourself time,
Yep.
keep praying on it. You've got family, you've got support. But
Yep.
one thing that I have found to be helpful is trying to help other people.
Yeah.
I have found to be helpful for me in whatever
Yep.
capacity that may look like.
Yep.
And it's not always the healthiest thing, right? Because it allows me to put the focus on somebody else, but I'm still not doing the real work on me,
Right.
So it's my new way of coping. Let me
Well,
help you, and let me help you.
do you find yourself telling other people all these things, and then, like, while you're saying it in your head, saying, why don't I take my own advice on some of this stuff? Like, I'm a big talker over here telling this guy, and I'm not doing it myself.
Obviously, we must read from the same playbook, because that
We
is the
do.
truth. That is
We
the
do.
truth. That is the
Yeah.
truth. Yeah, sometimes
Listen,
it's better to give the advice than to take
yeah.
it yourself.
We're big authorities, right? Wow. Well,
Mhm.
next, And this is what's really cool, and you started to allude to this, but not soon after your injury, you found the courage to release anger and embrace healing. You recognized that true strength lies in forgiveness, which a lot of people are not able to do. And you founded Wisdom and Understanding LLC. Tell us what that is and how proud are you of what it has become?
Wow. So Wisdom and Understanding, I incorporated in 2001, July 2001. So how I even got into this line of work, I worked at Kessler from 95 through 2001 as a coordinator for a program they had called Rise Above It. It was kind of like,
Cool.
going out into the schools and talking to kids about what causes violence. And really at the core of it was to help young kids in the inner city to prevent them from sustaining spinal cord injuries and teach them about violence.
Now,
And
is that
so
like the Think First stuff that Jamil does now?
Yep.
Okay,
So the Think
probably
First
a precursor to that.
well, Think First and Rise Above It was happening simultaneously. But
Okay.
Think First was more about motor vehicle and diving accidents and things of that nature. Right.
Yes.
And then Rise Above It was really focused on the violence component. And
Gotcha.
so, funding came to an end. And then in 2001, I just wanted to continue to do this work because I found it to just kind of like be my calling. And I felt really passionate about helping other kids, preventing them from having to experience the same things that I did. And so when I was laid off at Kessler in 2001, so I was laid off in May of 2001 and I incorporated Wisdom and Understanding in July, 2 months later. And really what I did is I was just going out in the schools and getting, it sounds so easy now, but just getting contracts with school districts and talking to kids. And so fast forward to probably about 8 years into doing that, I was able to connect with an organization called Breaking the Cycle. And they are an international motivational speaking company and they travel all over the world. And so they heard about me and they asked, "Hey, Hashim, would you be interested in partnering up with us and being one of our speakers?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they were like, "Yeah, but one of the things we really talk about is forgiveness." I was like, "Oh, okay." And they was like, "Yeah, we heard you in an interview. You said you forgave the kid who shot you." And I was like, "Yeah, I do, but that's not something I talk about." But they said, but your message we think could really, I think they were just saying to me that my message along with forgiveness could really be powerful for kids because a lot of kids just deal with stuff and don't know how to let things go and talk about it.
Yeah.
But
It
while
would
I was
totally
working,
resonate with people. Yeah.
yeah. And so while I was working with this organization, I still work on them to this day. There was a speaker. His name was Detective Stephen McDonald. And he was an NYPD police officer who was a tetraplegic he was one of those speakers. And so
he
I got
just passed within the last couple of years, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did in 2018.
Yeah, they used to bring him to the Rangers games, I remember all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Yep. So I had a chance to work alongside him for many years. And he was really the main person that really opened my eyes to the power of forgiveness because he had a pretty high injury and he would go and talk to students and it would probably be like 3,000 kids in an auditorium and John and he was on a ventilator and he had to take his time, but the kids were so patient and they were so engrossed in every word that he said.
Of course.
But what really struck me and moved me was that if he could get up in front of audiences and tell them that a 15-year-old kid shot him and paralyzed him, and had he not forgiven him, he said that had he not forgiven him, the cancer of like revenge would have finished him off,
Yeah.
And I just found his words to be so powerful that I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out and start talking. I'm going to tell people, a kid shot me and I forgave him. But forgiving myself has been the ongoing challenge. But really, Officer Stephen McDonald, my good friend, he really opened my eyes to how important that message is.
That's amazing. And so the main central message that you try to get across when you're doing your speaking is just that. It's that, you need to forgive and not forgive and forget, but you need you want to remember, but you can't hold that grudge your whole life.
Yeah. I mean, it's really layered, but there's a quote that I read years ago that really resonates with me. And it's from Dr. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the quote goes, "The way you see the problem can be the problem. And it's
Mm,
about that paradigm shift of just kind of like looking at things through a different lens, right? To
yeah.
like kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a second. And it helps me to kind of really just stay grounded and realizing that there's another way of looking at things. And that's what
Right.
forgiveness is. It's just
Yeah.
another approach to how we can heal from trauma, heal from
Hmm.
adversity. And that's really
Hmm.
what it's about. It's not saying that it's a quick fix. It's not saying that, it's something that we do one time and we never have to do it again, but it's really an important tool that
Yeah.
many of us struggle with implementing enough.
It's
And so
evolving. Yeah.
yeah, so
That's
to answer
great.
your question.
That's great. How about now? You wear a lot of hats. You're not only a motivational speaker,
Right.
but you're also an author. So
Mm,
tell us about the book you wrote, How to Fall Up, 14
right.
Lessons in Resilience from the Lives of Young People. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yep. So this is the book, How to
All
Fall
right.
Up, right? And so it was always an idea that I had that I wanted to write a book, and I was able to actually finish it. And really, how the concept came about is I was always going and talking to students in different communities and suburban and rural and inner city schools.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've often found is that one, kids like stories, right? And this is why I'm on your show now. It's like, tell us your
Yeah.
story. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to hear somebody's story. And so what I did is I just kind of wrote 14 short stories, and each story really just deals with different situations that people may find themselves in, and trying to figure out, how do I get from this place of uncertainty to clarity, right? And so there's something that's really I'm wrestling with, that's bothering me, but I don't know how to see my way out of it. And so
Right.
many of the stories involve mentors, just kind of giving them words of wisdom and guiding them through it. Many of it is, parents and friends and family, but everybody's going through, every story starts out with somebody's going through something. And now we're gonna follow this family or this person and see how they get through it. And so at the end of every story, there's some lessons learned, and what can you do to apply it? One of the stories is, why do bad things happen to good people? Right? That's
Yeah.
something that we all wrestle with. Why?
They sure
You
do.
know, right? And so there's some lessons that we can learn, right? There's some
Hmm.
lessons that we can learn in adversity.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've realized in life is that resilience, and this is the cornerstone of the book, is resilience has to be taught, right? Somebody has to teach you how to overcome those rough
Yeah.
moments in life.
Right.
Because if somebody doesn't teach us how to be resilient, then there's going to be a polar opposite of somebody who's going to teach us how to give in to adversity, right? And somebody's going to say, well, hey, you could always smoke, hey, you could always drink, or you could always just
Right.
tuck it under the rug and act like it
Yeah.
doesn't exist, but
Exactly.
and so we need somebody to just say, hey, if something bothers you, you can talk about it. If
Hmm.
something bothers you, you can pray about it. If something
Yeah.
bothers you, you can go to the gym and go take a
Right.
walk. But we need people to go, I didn't
Right.
know that. So is that how you got through it? Yes, it was exactly how I got
A
through it.
light bulb moment, right?
Yeah, you go, oh, I've got this epiphany. And so,
Yeah.
and we're a lot stronger than we realize. Human beings, we're
Sure.
a lot stronger. But sometimes we just need people to help us we need people to remind us how strong we are. And we need people to just kind of show us the way when we're really feeling lost. And that's
Sure.
the purpose of the book.
And what sort of feedback have you gotten from those that have read the book? And I'm sure they've gotten a lot of great lessons from that.
Yeah, unfortunately, so fortunately, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I have, but I haven't really plugged it as much. So last May, like a month ago, I just graduated from NYU with my master's, and so that was like an all-encompassing task to go back to
Yeah.
school and finish up school. And so now that I've got that underway, my next big venture is, all right, Hashim, now you wrote the book, but it's not going to move off the shelves without you putting a little, put some work behind it. So
Yeah.
that's the next goal, is to go, okay, now that we've accomplished this task, now we have to actually promote it and get it out there more. But the
Isn't it
feedback
so
has been
hard?
positive.
I obviously, yeah, I knew I was going to put that ball on the tee for you to hit it down the fairway, because I know the feedback is going to be phenomenal. But you know, in a world like today, like we started off talking about kids playing with sticks and things like that, and now we have a world where you have to use social media to promote all of your stuff. I know with my podcast, I have this might be my 100th episode. That you could be the guy on the
Wow.
100th episode. But I don't know I don't really promote it. I don't really, get it out there. I should learn more and you're going to probably find the same thing with putting your book out, but it's like a job. It's a business. You got to really put the work in if you want to get,
Yeah.
not the acclaim, but if you want to have people to learn lessons from these sorts of things, there's a lot that goes into it. So
No, I appreciate it.
I
But
hope you're,
congratulations to you with
well, thank you.
so many episodes underneath your belt. That's
Yeah.
that's no small feat. So congratulations. I'm glad
Well,
I'm glad I could be
Hashim,
a part of it.
a lot like you in your book, it hopefully it's like a blueprint for folks that are newly injured, and then for some guys like you and I that have been out in this game for a while, that maybe hit a bump in the road, to know that, while it's not necessarily ideal, again, it's not the end of the world, and there's still so much that can be done in our conditions. And
Right.
I'd like to think that we're two guys that are living proof of all of that, right?
And indeed, definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad
Well,
I'm glad I got a chance to be on it. Excellent.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Now, you told me another thing I didn't know about you. I didn't know that you had worked at Kessler prior to working there now, but I know you're
Mhm.
back with us at the foundation.
Mhm.
When did you come back, and what are some of your responsibilities with us now?
Okay, so I got back at Kessler Foundation. So I used to work at Kessler Rehab, the KIR,
Okay.
the rehabilitation part, but now I'm at the foundation. So I started in
Okay.
2024, so just a little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my role there is a research assistant. And well, I work on with the spinal cord injury department. And really, what I also, so a few hats, but my role is research assistant. But there's a navigator program where we enroll people who sustain spinal cord injuries, and
Yeah.
really kind of provide resources for them, because as you mentioned earlier, the length of stays are so short that once a person is discharged, they don't have the same interdisciplinary team that they had with the physiatrists, the nurses, the social workers, OTs, the PTs. They don't really have all of those people there to assist them once they get discharged. So
Yeah.
what the Navigator program does is really help individuals, newly individuals, or those who've been injured for years, and just kind of help them navigate the complexities of the healthcare system. Maybe, as you mentioned, a person is about to get discharged and they have no idea how they're going to, if their home is accessible. And
Mm-hmm.
so what the Navigator team does, and we have some great people on the team, Emily and Samantha and Elise and Dana and Naomi, got to
Yeah.
plug them all. And
Yeah.
so what
Please.
they do is they do a lot of home visits, and they'll go and make sure, kind of talk with the caregivers, and explain to them some things that can be done to make sure that transition is as smooth as possible. Or if some people are looking to maybe return to work, and just kind of provide them with resources
Yep.
to help them, not really at the core, helping individuals and families not feel so alone, right? And just knowing that they've got support. And so it's been a real joy to work with the foundation on those endeavors. And then another
Mm-hmm.
program that I work with is called Understanding Wheelchair Breakdowns, and it's really about recruiting people who have had some memorable wheelchair repairs and experiences within like the last 5 years, and just asking them, what was that process like, getting your wheelchair repaired, right?
Yeah.
And so many people are sharing stories with us, and they're just saying, listen, I chose the self-repair because the bureaucracy of trying to get my repair done in a timely manner just doesn't seem like it doesn't happen as quickly as I'd like. And so we
Sure.
hear people say, I needed to get something repaired on my chair, and it took me months to get it repaired.
Yeah.
Some people are stranded in their homes because, can you imagine if a person has an issue, a repair with their chair, and their chair isn't functioning, and now
Yeah.
they only have one chair and that chair doesn't work? Well, how are they supposed to, one, even get out the bed? Or how are they gonna, go to a doctor's appointment or go to school or work? And so what we're doing is collecting some real stories, and hopefully you can kind of like move the needle and inform the vendors, inform policymakers to say, hey, this is a real issue.
Yeah.
And so it's really about the squeaky wheel gets the oil. and bringing awareness to the plight of, a community that most people don't know, the issues that wheelchair users have to endure when their
Mhm.
wheelchairs break. So those are
Yeah.
two projects, the Navigator program and the Understand Wheelchair Breakdown.
Paying it forward, right? Paying it
Indeed.
forward for the next people that come behind us. You mentioned the navigators. I'm glad that you brought that up. I can remember being in those team meetings with you and the over in the foundation. It was always nice. Not only did I get to come over and have a delicious free lunch with everybody. Thank you for everybody. I got to bring my dog, and he always wanted to partake in the lunch because, as you know, with dogs, food is the end all be all. But I remember on the ground floor when that was getting going, and I thought, what a tremendous idea this is, because
Yeah.
like I always tell people when I'm going around to peer mentor and go into the rooms, and I see not only the patient in the bed, but the mother and the father, the husband, the uncle, whoever it is, neighbor, sitting beside their loved one in the bed. And they all have that same look on their face. Like, okay, can somebody please get the license plate of the truck that just derailed our entire existence, our
Right.
whole life? And it's like, where do these people go? Where do they turn? So many questions. And so that the navigators, I know, is really trying to take a bite out of all of that. And I'm glad that it's now, I mean, it was in its infancy stages when we were having those meetings, and now that it's a living, breathing thing is just so great for the people now.
Yeah, no, it really is. And, I'd be remiss if I don't mention, my supervisor, the person who kind of, who's spearheading a lot of this, Dr. Denise Fife, who's kind of
Without question.
really assembled this dream team of, great people, again, the Emilys and the Samanthas and
Yeah.
the Naomi, who was, many of them, the therapists were working at Kessler, rehabilitation, and now they're over here at the foundation, and they just all bring their own experiences and knowledge, and it's
Of
been a
course.
real joy to partner up and learn from them.
Yeah.
And so again, just Dr. Fife bringing everybody together, and Trevor Hudson Dyson, and it's just some really great people, and Dr. Gene Zanka, just
Yeah.
some really great people over there at the foundation that you get a chance to just see how they put all of these things together for caregivers. And because I think the caregivers, sometimes it's so easy to forget how important
Yeah.
they are to the well-being of the person, the client, the person
Mm-hmm.
who sustained the injury. And
Yeah.
so there's some great programs out there for the caregivers, and just letting them know as well, because they can be a part of the Navigator program too. They can enroll. So,
Yeah. They're in
I
it
think,
too.
yeah, exactly. Because, we want to make sure we help the helpers.
Yeah.
So,
We got to keep them into it mentally too, because these things just don't affect the person laying in the bed. They affect
right.
everybody. It's
Indeed.
like a bird that falls out of a tree and it hits every branch on the way down, right?
Yeah.
It affects so many people, and I'm glad that you brought up Dr. Fife and Dr. Zanka and Trevor, and they're great people, and they're all we're all pulling on the same rope, and I'm honored to be doing it along with yourself, and so I'm glad we were able to bring them up and make sure that people know who they are that are doing all of this. How about last two for me? Tell us what's next. You sort of glossed over, which is an amazing accomplishment, and that was getting your master's degree. So what's next for you? And if you could tell us, what a day in the life is outside of Kessler, like with your family and things that you're interested in nowadays.
Great question. So I think the one thing that I guess I'm the most proud of, the accomplishment, or the title rather, I don't know if I would call it accomplishment, but the title is being a dad, being a father of two beautiful children. My 17-year-old daughter Harmony, who's entering her senior year in high school, which is
Wow.
kind of hard to wrap my mind around, right? And then my
Yeah.
13-year-old son Zen, who's entering the high school. It's all just like how does time fly?
It's a blur.
Yeah, it's a real blur. But I can say, that's my greatest joy, is just being a father and being present for them, and blaming my daughter because before she was born, I had a full head of hair. It was really beautiful. I could go on and on about this beautiful mane that I had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so now it's all, looking like
Wow.
Kojak, Telly Savalas over here.
I'm
But
catching up to you.
yeah. So hang on, just
Wow.
hang on to every follicle, my friend.
I'm trying to.
But yeah, so that's my biggest joy is just, spending time with them and watching them grow and supporting them. But then also, I'm at that now what phase because as I mentioned, I graduated and I wanted to go back to school and accomplish that. And now I'm just going,
Yeah.
so now what do I do with it? You got
Right.
the degree.
Yeah.
Now you wrote a book. Now what? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
the joy is in the journey sometimes, not reaching it. So
Yeah.
now I've reached it. And so it's just about just setting a new bar, setting a new goal, right?
Good.
And so, and that
Good.
what that new goal is right now is again, promoting a book and just kind of like figuring out where I'm gonna go next and what I'm supposed to do because I didn't reach out to Kessler Foundation. Dr. Fife, she reached out and she's like, oh, we got this, we're working on this project, Hashim. I want your ear about something. And before I knew it, she was like, hey, Hashim, would you mind coming to work? And I was like, all right, sure. And there's like
Yeah.
everything happened for a reason, so
It
I'm at
does.
where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I'm really just kind of just trying to stay present and just really enjoying understanding how I can be helpful where I'm at. And, it took me some time to get my bearings here at the foundation and just go, oh, they've got a lot of programs and they're trying to
Yeah.
do a lot of work. And now I'm going, I can connect this person with that program and connect this person.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, I see where
Yeah.
I'm needed now and just,
Yep.
just be present and you'll figure out your next marching orders, what you're supposed to do next.
That's a really healthy outlook when you kind of get your sea legs under you and now you kind of feel like you're really a big part of the team and you can see what the future looks like in that respect. And so that's really important to know, you're making a difference and it's a healthy outlook. And I think I'm glad that you were able to come to that, which then will bring me to my last question, which I save up for all of my guests who unfortunately have endured injuries like we did. And it's an interesting story. I came up with this. I was waiting in the hallway for a doctor's appointment to see Dr. Kirschblum a number of years ago. And believe it or not, Hashim, I was with a high school friend. He was a guy a couple of years ahead of me in high school, but we were buddies going way back when, and he unfortunately had a devastating spinal cord injury. He was a high quad. He was a C5 complete quad. And so we were both waiting in the hallway. He was waiting for his appointment. I was waiting for mine. And I said, hey, Tommy, we used to call him T. I said, hey, T, if I could snap my fingers right now and you would be completely able-bodied once again, what do you think And so as I looked over at him and I saw the smoke start to pour out of his ears as he was trying to come up with an answer to it, there was a woman behind me and she said, I would go into my garden and plant some flowers. And then a guy over to my right said, I used to work on cars and I would get back under the hood of my car and turn a wrench here and there. And I thought, I didn't have a podcast back then, but it's a question that I would think everybody would have an answer to. And maybe it's evolved for some people over the years. I know it has for me. But if I were to ask you that question, what do you think the first thing you would do would be if, you were wake up in the morning and, whoa, I can get out of bed and do all of this?
Wow, that's a great question. So my first answer would be I would want to go to the beach. I would want to go to the beach. I'd want to run on the sand. I'd want to go really play in the water and just let the
Oh,
waves, to jump up and down. That
yeah.
part, yeah, yeah. So
Any
that would be
specific beach?
a clean beach. Clean beach, blue waters, blue waters. No,
Okay.
I don't really have a preference.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know if maybe any New York beaches were your
Nope.
favorites.
See, no, not the ones that I saw lately didn't look that pristine. So I'd have to probably get on a plane and go a little bit south somewhere.
All right.
So Jamaica or Florida. I'm not sure.
Yes, where you could see through the
Yeah,
water.
yeah, I can see through and
See
look
the
at
sharks about to take your leg off.
But that would be it. That's my first thought, and then
Okay.
probably just dance, just dance.
Yeah,
That would be it.
that's great. I've heard a
Yeah.
number of responses. I know Eric LeGrand told me, he said, you want to know the first thing? I said, yeah. He said, I'd
Mm.
run down my street butt naked and let everybody see my. Then I've had some people say, believe it or not, I would just stand in front of the toilet and empty my bladder. And I'm like,
Okay. Okay.
it's not the most, sexiest thing in the world, but people in our world, I could feel the same way, and so
Yeah.
there's so many different answers because
Yeah.
these injuries affect us in so many different ways. That's just the thing.
Right.
And so Well, Hashim Garrett, I want to thank you for joining me today. We've known each other over the years, seeing each
Yeah.
other in the hallway, and we always have. I always enjoy seeing you and catching up. And like I said, we have so much in common other than the spinal cord injury, and I look forward
Mhm.
to more conversations together. Maybe we could do some more of those. We're going to try and get one of these man caves again together.
Mhm.
We did, Jamil Williams and I put a little something together. We've only had really one of them because,
Mhm.
just everybody's so busy, but it would be great to get you involved with that and just to be able to have you on here to learn more about you and to be able to share your story with my audience has been a pleasure and an honor. And again, thank you for joining me today.
No, honestly, I'm truly honored that you thought of me, and it's been a joy, to not only be on your show and to support what you're doing, but always, as you mentioned, just kind of like seeing you in the hallway and enjoy talking with you. And everybody stops and wants to see the dog, and so, but you are a phenomenal human being, and I'm glad that I could support you. And when you have the man cave up and come up, up and running, just let me know, and I'll definitely support you in that as well.